I should have turned around the moment I saw him. But 7 years of building myself into someone he could never ignore again. I wasn't about to run. The marble lobby of Seoul's Grand Hyatt stretched before me like a battleground. Crystal chandeliers cast dancing shadows across my burgundy silk dress, custom-made in Lagos, worth more than his family's monthly income back when they decided I wasn't good enough for their precious son. My hands weren't shaking anymore. That was new. Jin Woo stood near the conference registration desk, his back to me, shoulders hunched in a way that screamed defeat. The expensive suit couldn't hide how it hung loose on his frame, or how his hair had started thinning at the crown. 7 years ago, he'd filled every room he entered. Now he looked like he was apologizing for taking up space. I touched the diamond wedding ring on my finger, not his ring, never his ring, and felt the familiar surge of power that came with choosing myself first. Before I tell you how this reunion destroyed everything I'd rebuilt, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Because this story about second chances and hidden identities might change how you see your own transformations. Subscribe to Mystic Tale by Luna, where stories reveal the secrets we bury to survive. The conference badge around my neck read, Dr. Amara Okafortune, CEO, Intercontinental Bridge Consulting. The hyphenated name always made people curious. Today, it would make one person's world collapse. I'd been invited as the keynote speaker for cross-cultural leadership in Asian markets. My company specialized in connecting African businesses with Asian opportunities. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd become successful by bridging the exact cultural gap that his family used to destroy us. My phone buzzed. A text from my assistant in Lagos, Mrs. Chen, the Jakarta deal closed. 15 million confirmed. Also, little Kemi wants to know if you're bringing her anything pretty from Seoul. Kemi. My daughter. His daughter. The secret I'd carried for 6 years like a precious wound. I started walking toward the registration area, my heels clicking against marble with the rhythm of inevitability. Other conference attendees noticed, they always did now. The transformation from that broken 22-year-old student to this woman commanded attention. Excuse me, aren't you the lady from the business magazine cover? A young man with a press badge approached, phone already recording. The one who built the African-Asian trade empire from nothing? From nothing. I smiled, tasting the beautiful lie. I'd built it from heartbreak, from rage, from the ashes of everything his family tried to burn down. Sometimes nothing is the best foundation. It means you owe nobody anything. As I signed autographs and posed for photos, I watched Jin Woo from the corner of my eye. He was struggling with the registration system, looking lost and overwhelmed. The boy who once navigated Seoul like he owned it now seemed like a tourist in his own city. That's when I heard the conversation that changed everything. A hotel concierge approached him with concern etched across her professional smile. Mr. Kim, your wife called the front desk earlier. She seemed quite upset about some divorce papers. She wanted to confirm your room number, but our policy. I nearly dropped my champagne glass. He was married. To someone else. Getting divorced from someone else. The transformation I'd undergone, the success I'd built, the woman I'd become, all of it had been for a man who hadn't even waited. Who'd probably forgotten my name by Christmas that year. My chest tightened with a familiar panic. For a moment, I was 22 again, standing in his family's living room while his grandmother called me, that African girl, like it was profanity. While his mother counted the silverware after I'd eaten dinner, making sure the poor foreign student hadn't stolen anything. But then I remembered my reflection from this morning. The confident woman in the hotel suite mirror, preparing for a presentation that would earn my company millions. The mother who'd raised a brilliant daughter single-handedly. The CEO who'd been featured on 3 magazine covers this year alone. I straightened my shoulders and finished my champagne. Let him get divorced from whoever was unlucky enough to marry into that toxic family. Let him struggle with conference registration and ill-fitting suits. Let him look like a ghost of the man who once promised me forever. I was Dr. Amara Okafor now. I didn't need him to recognize me. But I wanted him to. I wanted him to see exactly what his family's rejection had created. I wanted him to understand that their "not good enough" had become more successful than you'll ever be. I wanted him to know that the woman they discarded like trash had built an empire from pure determination. Most of all, I wanted him to realize that when you throw away something precious, sometimes it transforms into something magnificent. And sometimes that magnificent thing comes back to show you exactly what you lost. I walked toward the registration desk, each step deliberate and powerful. Time to reintroduce myself to the man who once knew me better than anyone, and now wouldn't recognize me if I stood right beside him. Which was exactly what I was about to do. The lobby's background chatter faded as I approached. My heartbeat slowed to match my breathing, controlled and steady. This wasn't about revenge anymore. This was about showing him the truth he'd been too cowardly to fight for 7 years ago. I stopped directly behind him, close enough to smell the familiar cologne he still wore, close enough to see the registration form shaking slightly in his hands. Close enough to destroy his world with 2 simple words. "Hello, Jean Wu." He turned around like he'd been struck by lightning. The registration form fluttered to the marble floor as his eyes met mine. I watched recognition fight its way across his features, confusion first, then disbelief, then something that looked dangerously close to pain. "Amara?" His voice cracked on my name like he was testing whether I was real. "Amara Okafor?" "Dr. Okafor now, actually." I kept my tone light, professional. The way I spoke to business partners who needed to understand exactly where they stood. His gaze traveled from my face to my outfit, to the conference badge hanging around my neck, to the diamond wedding ring catching the lobby lights. I could see him calculating, trying to reconcile the broken student he remembered with the woman standing before him. "You look." He swallowed hard, searching for words. "Different. Completely different. 7 years tends to do that." I bent down to pick up his dropped form, noting how his hands trembled as I handed it back. Especially when you use them wisely. The years had been less kind to him. Lines around his eyes that hadn't been there before. A softness to his jaw that spoke of too much stress and not enough sleep. The confidence that once made him magnetic had dimmed to something uncertain and apologetic. "I heard you speaking earlier," he said, gesturing toward where I'd been surrounded by admirers and journalists. "Your English, it sounds so polished now. So professional." I almost laughed. As if speaking proper English was some miraculous transformation instead of the result of expensive education and years of international business deals. Amazing what you can accomplish when you're not constantly being told you're not good enough. The words came out sharper than I intended, but I didn't take them back. He flinched. "Amara, about what happened?" "Ancient history." I checked my watch, a limited edition piece from Switzerland that cost more than his family's monthly grocery budget. "I actually have a presentation to prepare for. The keynote address." "You're the keynote speaker?" His eyes widened. "For the entire conference?" "Cross-cultural leadership in Asian markets. My specialty." I smiled with the kind of confidence that comes from building something from nothing and watching it thrive. Turns out my background in navigating cultural differences was more valuable than anyone expected. "Including you," I didn't say. "Including your family who thought my Nigerian heritage was something shameful to hide." A group of conference attendees approached, clearly wanting photos and conversation with the successful businesswoman they'd been reading about. I started to turn toward them, but his voice stopped me. "Wait." The desperation in his tone was new. 7 years ago, he'd never had to beg for my attention. Could we talk? Later, I mean. After your presentation?" I studied his face, noting the hope flickering there like a candle in the wind. Part of me, the part that remembered loving him completely, wanted to say yes immediately. But the stronger part, the part that had learned to value itself, hesitated. Why? I asked simply. Because I. He ran his hand through his hair, a gesture so familiar it made my chest tight. Because I've thought about you every day for 7 years. Because I made the biggest mistake of my life when I let my family. Let them? The words cut through the lobby noise like a blade. You didn't let them do anything. You chose them. You chose their approval over me. Several people nearby turned to look at us. I lowered my voice, not wanting to create a scene that would end up on social media. Professional reputation mattered more than personal vindication. That's not fair, he said quietly. You know how complicated it was. The cultural expectations, the family business, the way my grandmother. The way your grandmother what? Called me, that African girl, like I was something she'd scraped off her shoe. The way your mother made me eat separately from the family during visits. The way your father suggested I was only with you for financial security. Each memory fell between us like stones. He had no answer because there was no answer. We both knew exactly what his family had done, and exactly how he'd responded to it. Things are different now, he said finally. I'm different. My family, they've had time to think. About what? About how wrong they were. Or about how successful I've become. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Let me guess, they've seen the magazine covers. They know about my company now. His silence was answer enough. A hotel staff member approached with a tablet, asking for my signature on something related to the conference arrangements. As I signed, I noticed how he watched the ease with which I handled the interaction, the automatic respect I commanded. Mrs. Chen, the staff member said, your driver called. He'll be ready to take you to the television interview whenever you're finished here. Television interview. Driver. The markers of a life he couldn't have imagined for me 7 years ago. After the staff member left, we stood in silence for a moment. The lobby continued its elegant chaos around us, but we existed in our own bubble of shared history and painful recognition. You married someone, he said eventually, nodding toward my ring. Yes. I didn't elaborate. Let him wonder. Let him imagine another man putting this ring on my finger, promising me forever, choosing me completely. Are you happy? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Was I happy? I was successful, respected, financially secure beyond my wildest dreams. I'd built a life that impressed strangers and intimidated competitors. But happiness? That was more complicated. I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be, I said instead. Which is more than I could say 7 years ago. My phone buzzed with a text message. The screen lit up with a photo from Lagos, my 6-year-old daughter, Kemi, wearing her school uniform and grinning at the camera. The message read, Mommy, I finished my homework early. Can you bring me something pretty from Seoul? I love you. I stared at the photo for a moment too long, forgetting he was watching. You have a daughter, he said softly. I looked up to find him studying the phone screen, his face pale. Kemi had his eyes, his smile, the same stubborn chin that had made him impossible to argue with in university. Yes. My voice came out steadier than I felt. I have a daughter. She's beautiful. She looks. He stopped himself, but I could see the recognition dawning in his expression. The resemblance was unmistakable to anyone who knew what to look for. She looks like herself, I said firmly. Smart, confident, proud of her heritage. Both sides of it. The words hit him like a physical blow. I watched understanding crash over him in waves, the timeline, the resemblance, the reason I'd disappeared so completely. Amara, he whispered. Is she? I have to go. I stepped back, suddenly desperate for space between us. My presentation is in an hour, and I never show up unprepared. Please. We need to talk about this. No, we don't. I turned away, then paused. You made your choice 7 years ago. I made mine too. We're both living with the consequences. I walked toward the elevator bank, my heels clicking against marble with the same rhythm as my heartbeat, fast, determined, unstoppable. Behind me, I heard him call my name one more time. I didn't turn around. Some conversations were 7 years too late. The elevator doors closed like a shield between us, but I could still feel his stare burning through the metal. My reflection in the polished steel showed a composed businesswoman, but inside, my carefully constructed walls were cracking. 6 floors up, I fumbled with my hotel keycard 3 times before the door finally opened. The suite was exactly what I'd requested, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Seoul's skyline, a view that reminded me daily how far I'd climbed. But today, the city looked different. Smaller somehow. I kicked off my heels and immediately called Lagos. Kemi, baby girl. My daughter's face filled the screen, chocolate skin glowing with excitement. Mommy. You look fancy. Are you at the big important meeting? Just finished the first part. I settled into the armchair, letting her voice wash away the tension. Tell me about school today. We learned about family trees. I drew ours, but... Her smile faltered slightly. Teacher asked about Daddy again. I told her what you always say, but the other kids keep asking why I don't have Daddy pictures. My heart clenched. 6 years of protecting her from this exact conversation, and now fate was forcing my hand in the worst possible way. Kemi, what if I told you that Daddy lives far away, but he's a good person who just couldn't stay with us? Like Princess Sarah's daddy in my book. The one who had to go fight dragons? Something like that, baby. Sometimes grown-ups have to make very hard choices to protect the people they love most. After we hung up, I sat in silence, staring at the business cards scattered across the coffee table. CEO, entrepreneur, keynote speaker, all the identities I'd built to prove I was worthy. But to a 6-year-old asking about her father, none of them mattered. A knock at the door interrupted my thoughts. Room service, a voice called. I hadn't ordered anything, but opened the door anyway. Instead of hotel staff, there stood him, holding a bottle of wine I recognized, the same Nigerian red palm wine we'd shared during our first real date. How did you find my room number? I told the concierge I was your business partner. He held up the bottle like a peace offering. She was very helpful once I mentioned the Jakarta deal. Despite everything, I almost smiled. You were always resourceful when you wanted something. May I come in? I hesitated, then stepped aside. He entered slowly, taking in the luxury suite with obvious surprise. This wasn't the cramped student housing he remembered me living in. Nice view, he said, walking to the windows. I've worked hard for nice views. I stayed by the door, keeping distance between us. What do you want? He turned from the windows to face me. The truth. About your daughter. I told you the truth. She's mine. Amara, please. His voice broke slightly. I saw her photo. She has my chin, my eyes. She looks exactly like my baby pictures. The denial I'd prepared died in my throat. After 6 years of carrying this secret, I was exhausted from the weight of it. Her name is Kemi, I said finally. It means, care for me, in Yoruba. She'll be 7 next month. He sank into the chair across from me as the mathematics hit him. 7 years since I'd left Seoul. 6 years, 8 months since. You were pregnant when you left. 3 months. The words came out flat, emotionless. I found out the night after your grandmother's dinner party. The one where she made me eat in the kitchen because I wouldn't understand the conversation at the main table. He winced. I didn't know she. You knew. The anger I'd buried for years erupted like a volcano. You sat at that table and let her treat me like hired help. You smiled and nodded when your mother suggested I was gold digging. You said nothing when your father asked if my people even understood business concepts. I was trying to keep peace. Whose peace? I stood up, pacing to the windows. Because it certainly wasn't mine. Do you know what it's like to sit in a room full of people discussing your worthiness like you're not even there? My family was difficult, yes, but they would have come around. Would they? I spun to face him. Because 3 days after I left Seoul, your mother called me. Did you know that? She'd somehow gotten my Lagos number. His face went pale. What did she say? She offered me money. A substantial amount. To disappear permanently and never contact the family again. She said it would be better for everyone, including any complications I might be carrying. The silence stretched between us like a chasm. He stared at me with growing horror. She knew you were pregnant? She suspected. Mothers notice things like morning sickness and sudden dietary changes. I laughed bitterly. She was actually relieved when I refused the money. Said it proved I had some dignity after all. Amara, I swear I didn't know. It wouldn't have mattered. I sat back down, suddenly tired. You'd already made your choice. Family business over me. Traditional expectations over love. The easy path over fighting for us. That's not fair. You knew my situation. I knew you were a coward. The words hit like bullets. I knew you loved me, but not enough to disappoint people who treated me like garbage. He flinched as if I'd slapped him. I was 24 years old trying to hold together a failing family business. I was 22 and pregnant, completely alone in a foreign country where your family had spent months convincing me I was worthless. My voice rose despite my attempts to stay calm. But somehow I found the strength to build a life. To raise our daughter. To become someone who didn't need anyone's approval. Our daughter. He repeated the words like a prayer. God, Amara, I have a daughter. No. I stood again, towering over him. You have sperm that contributed to creating her. I have a daughter. I raised her. I walked the floors when she had fever. I taught her to read. I held her when she cried about not having a daddy. Tears were streaming down his face now. I would have, if I'd known. You would have what? Chosen her over your family? Fought for her the way you never fought for me? The question hung in the air unanswered because we both knew the truth. 7 years ago, he hadn't been brave enough to choose love over comfort. A baby wouldn't have changed his fundamental character. She speaks 3 languages, I said quietly. English, Yoruba, and French. She's learning Mandarin because she wants to understand all the places mommy does business. Does she know about me? She knows her father is East Asian. She knows he's probably a good person who just couldn't stay. She knows she's loved completely by the family she has. What if I wanted to meet her? The question I dreaded for 6 years. What if I said no? He looked up at me with desperate eyes. You'd really keep her from me? I'd protect her from disappointment. I moved to the window again, needing the distance. She's built a beautiful life believing she's perfect exactly as she is. I won't let anyone make her feel she's not enough. Like my family made you feel. Like your family made me feel, I confirmed. Like you let them make me feel. My phone rang, interrupting the charged silence. The caller ID showed my assistant's name. Mrs. Chen, I'm sorry to disturb you, but there's been a development with the Singapore project. The investors want to move the meeting to tomorrow morning instead of next week. Singapore? He looked confused. I covered the phone. Expanding into Southeast Asia. $15 million deal. When I finished the call, he was staring at me with something that looked like awe mixed with regret. You really did it, he said softly. You built everything you dreamed about. I built everything I needed to survive. Including a life without me in it. Especially a life without you in it. The words hung between us like a final verdict. Outside, Seoul's lights were beginning to twinkle as evening approached. He stood slowly, setting the untouched wine on the coffee table. I don't deserve forgiveness, he said. But I want you to know, leaving you was the worst decision I ever made. Every day since, I've regretted it. Regret doesn't change the past. No. But maybe it could change the future. I didn't answer. Some changes required more than regret. They required courage he'd never shown. I'll go, he said. But Amara, if you ever decide she should know her father, I'll spend the rest of my life proving I'm worthy of that gift. After he left, I stood at the window watching Seoul's skyline sparkle like scattered diamonds. For the first time in 7 years, I wondered if I was strong enough for what came next. 3 months later, I was back in Lagos when the call came. Mommy, there's a man at the gate, Kemi said, pressing her face against the living room window. He looks sad, but also nervous excited. Like when I have to give presentations at school. I set down my coffee and joined her at the window. My heart stopped. There he stood, holding a small wrapped gift and looking completely out of place against the backdrop of my Lagos neighborhood. He'd lost more weight, and there were new lines around his eyes that spoke of sleepless nights. Do you know him? Kemi asked with 6-year-old curiosity. Yes, baby girl. I know him. I'd been expecting this moment since Seoul, but that didn't make it easier. For 3 months, I'd wrestled with decisions that would change all our lives forever. The security guard called through the intercom. Madam, there's an Asian gentleman here. Says he has an appointment. I looked at Kemi, studying her face, his eyes, his stubborn chin, his gentle expression when he concentrated. She deserved to know where half her features came from. Let him in. We watched him walk up the cobblestone path, taking in the fountain, the tropical gardens, the evidence of the life I'd built without him. His steps were careful, respectful, like he understood he was entering sacred space. The doorbell rang like a countdown timer. Kemi, I need to tell you something important before we answer that door. I knelt to her eye level. Remember how you always ask about your daddy? Her eyes widened. Is that him? Yes, sweetheart. That's your father. She stared at me with the seriousness that made her seem older than her years. Why is he here now? Did he finish fighting his dragons? Out of the mouths of babes. Something like that, baby. He's here because he wants to meet you. But only if you want to meet him too. Will he stay this time? The question broke my heart. I don't know. But I promise you, no matter what happens, you and I will be okay. We always are, right? She nodded solemnly, then straightened her shoulders in a gesture so reminiscent of him it took my breath away. I opened the door. He stood there in a simple white shirt and dark pants, looking vulnerable in a way I'd never seen before. The gift in his hands was wrapped in bright African print fabric. Hello, he said softly, his eyes moving between Kemi and me. Hello, Kemi replied, stepping slightly behind my legs but not hiding entirely. You must be Kemi. I'm. He paused, uncertainty flickering across his face. You're my daddy, she said matter-of-factly. You have my eyes. His breath caught. Yes. Yes, I do. And you have the most beautiful eyes I've ever seen. I invited him in, watching as he took in the family photos lining the hallway, Kemi's first steps, her kindergarten graduation, birthday parties filled with love and laughter. A life documented in moments he'd missed. Your home is beautiful, he said. Thank you. Would you like some tea? Or palm wine? The offer slipped out before I could stop it, a Nigerian gesture of hospitality even toward complicated guests. We sat in the living room, an awkward triangle of shared DNA and careful conversation. Kemi perched on the edge of the sofa, studying him with scientific intensity. I brought you something, he said, offering her the wrapped gift. I wasn't sure what 6-year-olds like, so I asked my friend who has a daughter. Kemi looked at me for permission before accepting the package. Inside was a beautiful wooden puzzle featuring landmarks from around the world, a perfect gift for a child who loved learning about the places her mother traveled for business. Thank you, she said politely, then added with typical directness, why didn't you come before? The question hung in the air like a challenge. I watched him struggle with how to explain adult failures to a child who deserved simple truths. I made some very bad choices, he said finally. I was scared and chose the easy thing instead of the right thing. I hurt your mommy, and I missed getting to know you. I'm very, very sorry. Did you apologize to mommy? I'm trying to. Kemi nodded as if this made perfect sense. She says sorry is just words unless you change your actions. Are you changing your actions? I nearly choked on my tea. My daughter, the philosopher. I'm trying to, he repeated. That's why I came here. To see if maybe, if you and your mommy might let me try to be better. For the next hour, we navigated the strange territory of introduction. He told her about Seoul, about his work, about the family business that was slowly recovering. She told him about school, her friends, her dream of being a translator like mommy but for animals instead of people. I watched them find tentative common ground, a shared love of puzzles, an identical habit of tilting their heads when thinking, the same gentle way of listening that made others feel heard. Can I see pictures of your family? Kemi asked suddenly. The temperature in the room dropped several degrees. I knew she was curious about grandparents, uncles, cousins, the extended family she'd never known existed. He pulled out his phone carefully. This is my mother and father. And this is my grandmother, she's very old now, but still very strong-willed. Do they know about me? He glanced at me before answering. Yes. They know about you now. Do they want to meet me? This was the moment I'd been dreading. The moment when my daughter's innocent hope might collide with the reality of people who'd called her mother, that African girl. That's complicated, sweetheart, he said gently. They're still learning about what it means to have family in different countries, with different traditions. Oh. Kemi's face fell slightly. Are they embarrassed of me because I'm mixed? The question hit like a physical blow. At 6 years old, she already understood the complexity of her identity in ways that broke my heart. Never, he said fiercely. You are the most beautiful, intelligent, wonderful little girl in the world. Anyone who doesn't see that is missing out on something amazing. But they don't want to meet me yet. Not yet. But that's their loss, not yours. I found myself surprised by his honesty, his refusal to make false promises or paint pretty pictures of ugly realities. After he left that evening, with plans to return the next day and take us to the zoo, Kemi and I sat on her bed for our usual bedtime talk. I like him, she said simply. He seems sad about missing my life, but happy about getting to know me now. How do you feel about all this? I always wondered if my daddy would love me if he met me. Now I know he does. She paused, picking at her bedspread. But mommy, you don't have to like him just because I do. Auntie Folake says sometimes grown-ups have to make different choices than kids. My wise, protective daughter. Already understanding that love could be complicated, that families could heal in pieces rather than all at once. What if I told you I'm still figuring out how I feel? That's okay. You taught me it's better to take time and be sure than to rush and make mistakes. That night, I stood on my balcony looking out at Lagos lights and thinking about second chances. About forgiveness that comes in layers, earned through actions rather than words. He'd hurt me in ways that left scars. But watching him with Kemi, seeing his genuine remorse and careful respect for the boundaries I'd set, something tight in my chest began to loosen. Maybe some stories don't end with romantic reunion. Maybe some stories end with something better, two people choosing to build a new kind of family, one conversation at a time. Maybe the little girl who deserved to know her heritage was going to teach us both what love actually looks like when it chooses courage over comfort. For the first time in 7 years, that felt like enough.